Next up, we've got the SEO field in Dato. Now, anyone who's been working with a website or any other CMS for a considerable amount of time knows that pleasing the Google gods is always a top priority, which is very enjoyable. So in the background, I've gone ahead and added a single line string for a title to this blog post model to kind of demonstrate how one of the subfields would work. Within Dato, you have two subfields for SEO. You've got the slug, which is generated based on another field or manually, which is what we'll get into in a second. And the other one is the SEO and social, which is kind of where you would manage things like your OG title, description, OG images, previews, and so on. Taking a quick look at the slug field, you'd notice that we instantly have an alert to look at a validation. And this is where the reference field and the pattern come in. So we've added the title field, and what the SEO field does here is let you automatically generate a slug based on what the title of the post would be. And we also make sure out of the box that the web page slug is the pattern that this field follows. If you wanted to override this with a custom format, let's say you wanted to prefix or suffix your slug with something specific, you could also add in a regular expression. All of these can be manually overridden when you're editing the content yourself. So let's say you've got a blog post titled, "This is my post," and you wanted to change it to "This is my new post," you could always override this when creating content. It's also recommended to make sure, that this field is required so you don't have any issues with creating content, and keeping this unique. So again, you don't have any errors on the front end with having multiple posts or pages trying to query for the same slug. Depending on how long or short your posts and pages may be, you could also consider having a character count, just to have certain consistency in the length of your slugs. And lastly, on the presentation, you could make it slightly easier for editors just by having the entire URL visible whenever a new post is being created. So here, every time we create a new post, we would see that the final URL of this entry or this record would follow a specific convention. Secondly, you've got the sort of SEO and social field. This, let's just go ahead and call it socials for now. This is where you would have another set of SEO rules or sort of guidelines in place when creating new content. If you keep these required, then every time a new post would be created, the editor would have to make sure that the OG description and the OG title are manually modified. Alternatively, you could also keep a sort of rule or a set of rules on the front end that just query for the post's title and descriptions. And every time these are edited in the CMS, they're just simply a manual override and not the default. We do follow a few best practices based on how long we feel titles and descriptions should be, depending on how Google or other search engines truncate them for different devices. But if this doesn't match your best practices or your project, feel free to change these. For OG images, we also have the option to make sure that specific sizes or dimensions are being followed. So if you want a 1630 by 628, they're always changing. If you want a specific OG image size for different platforms, this is where you could make sure validations are in place as well. And finally, on the presentation for this field is where you could set what the editor can actually see. So if we're creating blog posts and we're curious about how they would look when we share them on different platforms, you have the option to have visible previews for different social media networks, as well as for Google, Slack, WhatsApp, and Telegram, which is quite useful when you're creating a lot of content for different platforms and sharing them, and kind of want a very quick look before publishing to see what that would look like on these platforms.